by mimicking extractive colonial-era trade relations. South Africa's minimal 0.25% share of total U.S. imports makes the 30% tariffs on our country are inscrutable, especially when these same tariffs have been applied indiscriminately to all U.S. trading partners globally. Moreover, South Africa poses no trade threat to the U.S. economy nor its national security. The calculation of U.S.-South Africa trade deficit ignores the substantial U.S. trade surplus in services, as well as the complementary nature of the bilateral trade and investment relations between the two countries. South African exports do not compete with U.S. producers and do not pose a threat to U.S. industry. On the contrary, in the U.S. markets, not replace domestic products. South Africa isn't just a trading partner. We are a major investor in the U.S., with our companies sustaining American jobs. Similarly, over 600 U.S. companies in South Africa contribute to our industrial growth and create employment. Our goal is to preserve and grow this mutual beneficial relationship. Impact of the tariffs. The uncertainty of the new tariffs is already incorporated into economic projections. For example, various economists estimated that it may shave off 0.2% of South Africa's economic growth. The reduction in growth from the 30% tariffs depends on a number of factors, including our ability to find alternative markets. It should be noted, however, that 85% of South Africa's exports remain exempted from the tariffs. All applicable exemptions published in the previous U.S. executive order are said to remain in force, and these exemptions covers products such as copper, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, lumber articles, certain critical minerals, stainless steel scrap, and energy products. Importantly, due to South Africa not enjoying a counter-exemption for Section 232 duties on steel and aluminium, South African companies have already adjusted to the Section 232 duties since 2018. However, the heightened policy uncertainty creates instability in trade and may have an impact on exports. The new tariff regime implemented by the United States is a significant departure from a low tariff environment. This policy shift, which affects not only South Africa, but the entire world, has already led to higher tariffs than before, changing the landscape of global trade as we know it. Response measures. Continuation of negotiations with the U.S. South Africa is committed to a principled approach, and we will continue to use all available diplomatic channels to negotiate a mutual beneficial trade deal with the United States, one that respects our national interests while advancing our long-standing partnership. Such a deal will be pursued in a pragmatic manner that preserves regional integration and SACO common external tariffs, noting that SACO accounts for 9% of our global exports and must be preserved. The South African government is working with industry to consider aspects of the framework deal that can be modified in a manner that promotes predictability in trade. Implement an economic response package which includes the establishment of an export support desk, which will serve as a direct point of contact for companies affected by the U.S. tariff hikes. The aim of this support measure is to support the diversification of export market for increased resilience and facilitate the entry into alternative markets for affected exporters. The desk will provide updates on developments and tailored advisory service to exporters on alternative destinations, guidance on market entry processes, insights into compliance requirements, and linkages to South African embassies and high commissions abroad. The contact details of the export support desk have been published on the DTIC website. B. Measures to assist companies to absorb the tariffs and facilitate long-term resilience and growth strategies to protect jobs and productive capacity in South Africa. The details of this being finalized and will be communicated shortly. C. Localization fund support stands ready to contribute to the national efforts to support South African companies impacted by the imposition of 30% import tariffs by the United States. In collaboration with the DTIC, IDC, and other agencies, the LSF will issue an open call from firms operating in affected value chains with the aim of providing targeted competitiveness and efficiency support. To build resilience, we are working on an export and competitive support program, which will include a working capital facility and plant and equipment facility to address short-term to medium-term needs across all industries. We are also working with the Department of Labor on measures to mitigate potential job losses using existing instruments within its entities. Block exemption for exporters. The diversification of markets that will be required following the introduction of additional tariffs on South African goods may require exporters to coordinate their activities in relation to developing joint infrastructure for exports, sharing of market information, and coordination of activities to achieve economies of scale and efficiencies that enable them to be competitive. These activities may contravene the provisions of the Competition Act. The Minister of Trade and Industry has followed consultations with the Competition Commission, introduced a block exemption of exporters to enable collaboration and coordination by competitors. The block exemption details the scope of application. A draft block exemption will be published by the end of the week so that processes can be concluded expeditiously. Diversification of markets. We have been strengthening the trade investment partnerships with various trade partners. These efforts are bearing fruits, targeting markets across Africa, as well as in Asia, Europe, Middle East, and Americas. Our announcement on the Clean Trade Investment Partnership with the European Union in March has unlocked a 90 billion investment package that has been initially committed. This Clean Trade Investment Partnership also aims to unlock new markets access opportunities for South Africa, including the export of sustainable aviation fuel by Sasol and the exports of hybrids and electric vehicles. While facing global trade challenges, South Africa is proactively building a more resilient agricultural sector. We've made significant progress in opening up vast new markets like in China and in Thailand, securing vital protocols for products like citrus and others. With China alone being a 200 billion market, we are confidently expanding our reach and creating new opportunities for our agricultural products. Our government has not been idle. We are proactively and collaboratively diversifying our trade portfolio. Under the coordinated leadership of the Presidency, DERCO and the DTIC, we are making significant inroads into new high-growth markets across Asia and the Middle East, including the UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. These efforts are not only opening doors to new opportunities, but also reinforcing our commitment to retaining the vital markets we already have. South Africa's economic future is resilient, and we are working tirelessly to secure it. We have also developed a number of trade and investment packages with a number of countries, including Japan, that aim to unlock new markets access opportunities. You will be aware also that next week there is also a TICAD forum in Japan. While the current measures present challenges, it also presents opportunities to build and accelerate the implementation of the AfCFTA and to develop new partnerships in markets that have remained untapped, including Asian and Turkey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Lamola. Good morning again, colleagues. My name is Kamil, as been previously introduced. I'll be facilitating the Q&A session. We'll take a round of 5 hands first. If you could please indicate your name and the news agency that you represent or the media house that you represent before you start your question. Okay, let's just take it this way. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, ma'am, at the back there. That will be the first round. Yeah, let's start this side. Thank you.
Good morning, Shannon Merrick, Star CBC Africa. Minister, we went from a 10% to a 30% tariff hikes. Who do we blame? Do we blame the ANC, a political party? Do we blame the Government of National Unity? Do we blame the right-wingers, Solidarity, AfriForum? Do we blame the left-wingers, EFF, MKP? Can you just tell us who's to be blamed? Because somebody must be blamed. So that's unfortunate. Second part, Can you explain this, Minister? You come from a village in Limpopo as well. Can you explain this to somebody on a farm? What does this mean? Is that farm worker going to lose their job in Eastern Cape, Western Cape, Limpopo, and so on? Somebody working on a shop floor in Eastern Cape in the automobile industry, are they going to lose their job? A maid, a gardener in Sandton, are they going to lose their job? Can you explain it to our people in townships, in the villages, in simple terms, what this means? Last but not least, China. Isn't this opportunity to open the floodgates to China once and for all? Let us trade with China. And that's the only way you're going to beat this tariff hikes. You need to open the floodgates. Say we buy, we import, we export from China in not small quantities trying to please America. But that's the only way you can save this whole thing. How do you respond, Minister? Thank you.
Thank you. If I can please request colleagues that we keep our questions to at least one each so we give everybody an opportunity to ask. Thank you.
Hi, Nick Wilson from News 24. My question is to either Minister Tao or Minister Lamola. Obviously, I obviously heard Minister Lamola tell us about the fact that we are looking for other markets. We're looking at China, $200 billion US dollar sort of market, and Japan. But don't these take years to develop? This is the worry. So basically, how are we going to fast track that to sort of make up the shortfall that would obviously come from us possibly, obviously losing the US market? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Nellie Payton from Reuters, also for Minister Tao or Minister Lamola. I'm wondering how much you think U.S. disapproval of South African policies, either foreign policy or domestic policy, played into this. There's been some suggestions that they were making demands around BEE, for example. So I'm wondering, is this really about trade, or were other diplomatic issues coming into the conversation, and how much so?
Thanks.
Hi, Judy from AFP News Agency. I'm wondering if you have updated figures about how many jobs are at risk across the country? And if I can just ask a second question to you, how are you taking a new approach in trying to continue negotiating with the US?
Thanks. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Diego Silva from SABC News. To both ministers, I just want to find out, in your economic response measures, you mentioned the localization fund. Do we know how much is in this fund and how it is going to be distributed? You're also going to be talking to the Department of Labor to see how they can help with job losses. Do you have any more information on exactly what kind of wages are you taking from the Department of Labor, given that the unemployment is already high, and if you're going to be helping people affected or workers affected by this, is there a specific program that you're going to be looking at, and can you explain a little bit more about those two details?
Thanks very much. So let's close the first round off there. If I can ask Minister Tao if you would come up and just address the 3 or so questions that have been given to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much and good morning. Firstly, let me make the point that, as indicated by Minister Lamola, we continue to engage with the US government, and it is our intention that these negotiations are continued until a point at which we're able to reach a conclusion. And that, I think, is an important statement to make, because I think that the idea that we can get to a point where we just decide that we're not going to talk to any government and we're not going to engage in trade negotiations, I think would be irresponsible for us as a country. Should we be apportioning blame? I think we should leave that to those that seek to score political points as opposed to finding solutions to the challenges that we have. And let me make an example about the negotiations. And we said this last week. We engaged with the US government that committed and said, look, we need you to wait a little bit. And this was in Angola almost a month ago. Wait a bit, we'll send you a template that's applicable to countries in sub-Saharan Africa. And then you can start the negotiations from there. And this is notwithstanding that we had given our draft framework deal or our proposed framework deal to the US. And we waited for the template. We followed up and we got to a point where there was an agreement, in fact, that South Africa please sign a confidentiality agreement, which confidentiality agreement would unlock the discussions. We signed the confidentiality agreement. We did not get a signed confidentiality agreement on the other side. We then went back and said, almost on the eve of the tariff announcements, said, look, we've been waiting for the template, we've been waiting for the confidentiality agreement. What do we do now? We are 2 days before the announcement. Well, what do we do now? And the feedback is, look, you know what, at this point, let's look at the template as a red herring at this point. Please give us an offer and we will respond. And no, that offer should not be a negotiating offer. It should be an offer of what South Africa offers and not what South Africa would want to negotiate in return. Give us what you are offering us and we'll come back to you. Now, it's a very difficult negotiating platform to enter into when you are in that situation, because you are going to give an offer which we have indicated certainly it's an offer that we're working on together with various industry sectors and departments to finalize. But that doesn't mean it doesn't come at a cost. Any offer you make, especially because you're not going to get a counter offer, you have to realize that actually there's a price you're going to pay for that offer. And we've been working on that, as I said, with industry and saying, okay, what can this industry offer? What can you accommodate? What can you do? But even when you're in that situation, part of your reality is that you actually don't know what tariff you're going to get even after making that offer. So we can only make an offer and sit and wait and hope. That's part of the reality. And we are negotiating, understanding that very reality. But we have to negotiate in the interest of the country, considering the importance of the United States in the global trading environment and as an important international role player. So we have to work within the framework in which all other countries are operating, but understanding that reality. So I thought it's important to elaborate on that, because when you start looking for who to blame, you're going to start thinking, if that one stops singing this song, well, we're going to get a 1% reduction. Because that's the sort of direction that you take when you start looking for the blame game. If these ones did not get onto a flight and go and say this would have meant a 5% reduction, that's all speculative. And that's why I spent a bit of time explaining the negotiating environment we're in, just to indicate that it is a complex negotiating environment that in many instances are actually unprecedented. It's unprecedented to enter into trade negotiations on the basis of the situation we're currently in, and we're going to have to navigate that. But I think I can speak on behalf of all of us to say, at this point, we are focused on the task and not focused on who to blame. We'll leave that to others. Should we shift to China and open the floodgates? It is not as simple as opening up floodgates. Of course, there have been a few developments with regards to China in particular, because that was your question. And those include the fact that China made an announcement at FOCAC this year that, in fact, we will reduce to 0% for all African countries but one. And we took the opportunity to engage with the Chinese to say, what does this mean? How do we actually implement it? And this is a few weeks ago. They said, well, you need to sign an agreement. So there's a China-Africa Economic Partnership Agreement. You either sign the China-Africa Economic Partnership Agreement or some form of free trade agreement so that you are able to unlock this. Now we have to, and we're currently sitting down with all the colleagues to say, if you enter into a negotiation, you have to understand that when you enter into a free trade agreement, you must accept product from them and take product to them. what product are you talking about and what does the agreement entail? Because if you simply open, you don't know what you're opening yourself up to. So you have to work with the understanding that, in fact, it is not just about I now signed the CAEP or the China-Africa Economic Partnership Agreement and the doors are open, because you have to think about how you safeguard your own markets, which industries would be impacted, and there's a bit of detailed work to be done, but those negotiations are ongoing, and we're currently modeling the sort of offer that we would be able to give. But the Chinese have also said that we would want to enter into an MOU with yourselves, which MOU would look at industrialization and green industrialization in particular. And they've given us the proposal. We're currently discussing it and should finalize it. I'm not going to ignore that that does not come with geopolitical implications, because in the discussions and negotiations that you have, you're likely to, we can't anticipate, but it might be that the discussion about who you are working with becomes an issue. And we've always taken a view that as a country that is non-partisan, as a country that has taken a view that, in fact, we will trade with all parties on the basis of what's in our interest, but also on the basis of global trade governing rules, we should be able to do that. But I'm not suggesting that there are unlikely to be complications in that discussion. It does take long to secure markets, but these are markets we've been working on. And I elaborated on China as but just one example. As indicated by Minister Lamola, we're in South Africa EU summit in March this year. We agreed to finalize the Clean Trade and Investment Partnership with them. They made an initial commitment of 90 billion rand to be able to invest as an initial commitment. We've agreed that working towards the G20 Heads of State Summit between now and then, or between the point at which we started the discussions, would finalize the details of what constitutes the Clean Trade and Investment Partnership. So it does take long, and you still have to deal with other realities. I mean, you would know we announced last year that we're in dispute with the EU around citrus and the citrus black spot. So to open up the citrus market in the EU does deal with sanitary and phytosanitary issues that you need to engage with, and that's part of the reality. So it's not as if you just walk in and open markets, but you do have agreements that you can leverage. And it depends on what sort of market opens up at which point that you're able to trade. I thought there's an important point that was made which relates to the fact that, firstly, the Section 232 tariffs are still applicable on steel and on the autos, as was introduced by the US. So that constitutes part of the trading basket. Then there's the part of the trading basket that has to do with the products that are exempted, as indicated by Mr. Lamola, in particular pharmaceuticals and mineral products that are exempted, and therefore you're not paying tariffs in those products. So when we're talking about products at the level of detail, you literally have to go into different tariff lines and thousands of tariff lines and say, what is the impact on this tariff line by this decision? Remember, the decision, you already are paying an additional 10%. And I think the point was made. You've already started with the additional 10%. And already there are certain sectors that have been impacted by that decision. You then have to model the additional 20% on top of the 10%. So it's not a new imposition, if you like. It's an increase to the imposition that had already been there. And you have to model literally at every point which tariff lines, which markets, which product that you work on. We are currently modeling with the localization support fund what structure of support they would give. We're not suggesting that every aspect of localization would be located in the localization support fund. Now, I'm emphasizing that because you would say, well, they have so many billion in their account, therefore this is what it implies. But you have to model it in line with other products in the support package that you provide to determine what role they would play. The fact that the Localization Support Fund is on board, the Department of Labor is on board in terms of modeling different support packages, seeks to mitigate the impact of these decisions. But some of the numbers that have been announced, I think we need to be careful, and we are very careful in finalizing what sort of impact it's going to be. So Agri-SA issued a report, I think, on Friday that indicated their modeling of the implications that is actually much less than was initially modeled. So you kind of have to literally go into the detail. The IDC has been working to get to impact at a firm level. And even when you get to impact at a firm level, it's not as if you're going into firms that only export into the US market. You literally have to go to the firm and determine what percentage of your product is impacted by this, what percentage of that product you can still get into the US market, notwithstanding the 30%, to then be able to determine what the impact would be. So drawing a straight line, I think, has been a mistake that we've all made over the past few months. We kind of say, when we're talking the auto sector, we say the auto sector is going to be impacted. We can't export vehicles into the US market. But when you drill into the detail, most of the OEMs that are in the country don't go into the US market. So you have to go to the OEM that goes into the US market to determine what's your percentage of product that goes into the US market to then determine impact. And as I said, I think we've all made the mistake of drawing a straight line and saying no export, therefore auto, therefore this is the number. And I think we're kind of at a point now that we're modeling it in detail and modeling what the alternatives are, because that's how you're going to design your final package. You now know the impact. You can design your final package on the basis of the actual impact that's going to happen. I'm a bit wary of getting into the detail of those numbers, lest the models tell us something else, because as we model the support package, we're going to have to take that level of detail into account. I'm sorry for taking so long. I thought my voice would go.
No, that's fine. It was good that you took so long because you gave all the details and the time frames. So I will just respond to one or two of them. Firstly, the approach that you have said as outlined, it is not out of cowardice that we have refrained from responding even under very extreme provocation. It was because of our understanding of the complexity of the geo-environment, because we are talking about the livelihoods and jobs of people that are at stake. So that's why we're focused on the ball, on the negotiations, on the framework, and we did not want to focus on the speculations, whether it's because of BEE or affirmative action or any other politics that has not been brought to the negotiation table. So we focus on what we have presented to the US government, and we believe we're dealing with that. We have yet the speculations from those that have visited Washington who have told us that these are the issues that they were told, but those issues are not in the feedback and what we have on the table with regards to the framework that we have submitted. And you will know there were also other issues before we went to Washington, and also those other issues are also not in this framework that we're dealing with. So we prefer to deal with what is in front of us at these negotiations, so that we separate facts and other things that we hear in the streets. So that is what we are currently dealing with, and that's why we remain open to engage with the US on the basis of this framework. And we will keep our eyes on the ball and focus on this discussion. And with regards to the opening up and diversifications of markets, you will have noted that when we raise the issue of value addition at source and also beneficiation, we raise it with the US, but not only with the US, we raise it with all our trading partners. If you look at the European Union statement we had with them here in March, it has a paragraph dealing with value addition in South Africa with regards to extraction. But also at multilateral level, when we're in China at FOCAC, led by our president, we continue to raise the issue of value addition and beneficiation in the African continent. And in all bilateral platforms and multilateral platforms, including the G7, the president has not missed an opportunity to raise the issue of beneficiation at source. He raises in all multilateral platforms, and not just for South Africa, but for the African continent as a whole, that we have got almost the majority of the mineral resources that the world needs as a continent that must be beneficiated at source. And we have got a responsibility to ensure that this period of artificial intelligence and green economies and so forth does not leave Africa behind. And South Africa has got a bigger role to play as a member state of the African Union through the Africa Free Trade Area, but also as a member of various multilateral organizations to continue to champion this issue. So we will raise this at a bilateral level and also at multilateral platforms. And it is in this regard that we see our relationship also with the US remaining very important at a mutual beneficial relationship that must be mutually respectful and beneficial. And that is how we'll continue to engage. That's why we will continue with the engagements with them, despite all the difficulties and uncertainties that we are encountering, because livelihoods, jobs, the economy is at stake, and we have to manage that in a responsible way. And as Minister Dawe has said, we are not in the sprint or game of political scoring. We have seen the political parties doing cheap political scoring on this matter that involves the lives of our people, particularly some of the partners in the GNU, which does undermine this process. Because our view is that when you are dealing with such complex issues, all South Africans should speak in one voice, in the national interest, whether opposition or in the GNU or in government or outside government or NGO or in business. We must all speak in one voice to promote the national interests of South Africa. Because if there are any implications, all South Africans will be impacted. So we all have a responsibility and a duty to protect and promote the national interests of the country. So that is the approach that we have taken, to be measured, to be responsible, to be very factual, to focus on the goal. And the goal is to, at some point, hopefully, find some agreement with the US government on the unilateral tariffs that they've imposed to us, which have also been imposed, by the way, to many countries across the globe. It's not only a South African phenomenon. So you can't just blame South Africa. It's a global phenomenon. It has been done even to their friends and foes. So the issue is whether with us we can find each other. And that is what we are working on, to hopefully at some point find each other with them on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ministers. I'm going to take another round of questions. I'm going to just request that if there are any on the virtual platform, can we indicate? Sorry, I can't see behind the light. So if colleagues can just indicate. We've got some?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Can we read those out first, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. We do have questions from Adra Omachi from Business Day. The first one, what is the way forward in terms of appointing a U.S. ambassador? And then the second one, did President Ramaphosa make calls to try and secure a trade deal for South Africa with the U.S. last week? And then the other one to Minister Lamola in particular, since Lady R, which granted was an economic sabotage to South Africa's stance on Israel, little has been done to fix SA and US relations, and is South Africa now paying the economic price? And then the other one, the agricultural industry, specifically the citrus sectors, they are saying that they have not been consulted at all. And then the other questions come from SABC, Lihlohonolo. The first one, are the ministers at liberty to disclose their trade proposal to the US? And the final question also, is this not an opportunity for South Africa to rethink its international allegiances, in particular with Iran?
Are those all from the virtual? Okay. Any more inside the room? I'll note 3 from inside the room. Let's go with Ndogozo. Gentleman in the grey jacket at the back, and gentleman over here. If you can start the side, please.
Good morning, Ndogozo from South Africa. I don't know if Minister Dow can give us any insights on sort of how the support desk has worked since it launched, these sort of businesses that we are seeing come on there, as well as in terms of township businesses that were getting export ready. Will the Transformation Fund dip in to assist them get into that export market? But also a slight change in the sort of language that we used when it comes to describing the support desk. Before it was launched, it was clear that the focus really was on US tariffs, and now it seems the focus is on the rest of export markets while still assisting with the US tariffs. If we can get maybe just clarity if there's a change in where our focus is as we continue the negotiations with the US. And then to Minister Lamola, you mentioned something about speaking to the Competition Commission. Do we have any of that concern around fast-tracking intra-Africa trade and getting the agreements going? Because it does take time to make things work. Will there be any competition issues on the continent? Thank you.
Colleagues, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, because there's quite a few questions now, I'm going to allow the team to respond. Ministers, I'll also allow you to defer to your technical teams in this round, if you so wish, and then we'll come back for one more round at the end of that.
We are checking the ambassador. You want to come?
Okay, Mr. Willem van der Spy, our Acting Deputy Director General for Exports at the DTIC.
Good morning, everyone. From the help desk side, it became active on Friday, and we've been fielding some calls from exporters specifically. Most of the exporters have been from the Western Cape. The key questions that there was clarification asked is with regards to when the tariffs come into effect. Also, there was also interest in terms of some of the products which are not covered within those tariffs which will be coming into effect. There were also questions around the shipment which are on water and the implications of those ones, so we've been giving clarifications around that. There's also a lot of interest shown in terms of the support measures, financial support measures, which I think was touched on today, to give further information around that. And then also We are also continuing to give updated information in terms of the negotiations. They were interested in what is happening with the negotiations. I think we've touched upon that as well. I think also important point to raise is to say while the desk is giving information, the primary focus of the desk is really to assist companies to enter new markets and diversify those markets. And we want to work with them systematically over the short to medium term to offer them new markets, but also as general for the country to diversify its markets as well. So the issue is to create resiliency in our international trade environment. And through this support desk, we will have practical areas of cooperation. We'll link them up with embassies. We'll link them up with potential buyers. We will also deal with the issues and take the journey with them in terms of some of the barriers, sanitary and phytosanitary issues. We'll also work with other partners around it. So it is a systematic process for us to really support them to look at different markets. Some companies, for example, have opportunities in other markets which they can advance. Others are looking at new markets. We're also assisting with them and engaging with them on those markets. And we're also looking at some of the key sectors, for example, which are affected by the tariffs specifically, that we're working with those companies as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. Yeah.
Let me just deal with the ambassador thing. Yeah, thank you very much. The question from Harja with regards to how far we are on the appointment of an ambassador. Let me preface it by saying that we had an ambassador in the US, and that ambassador was expelled. So President Ramaphosa has always prioritized the US in terms of an ambassadorial responsibility. So the fact that our ambassador was expelled means that the new process to appoint the ambassador will not be as easy as it will have been when an ambassador will have not been expelled. We have to take all careful consideration, all due diligence, and I can confirm that that process is at an advanced stage. And the president at the right time will announce who will become the ambassador of South Africa in the US. But I will mention that this will not be dictated to by anyone to the president. He will do so in line with his powers as provided for in the Constitution. Obviously, he may consult whoever he may deem necessary and prudent to consult to appoint this ambassador, but the process is at an advanced stage, and at the right time he will make the announcement of the ambassador. I must also hasten to mention that while ambassadors do play a role to point to the key players, decision makers, and so forth, ambassadors do not negotiate any trade deals. The trade deal is being negotiated under the leadership of DTIC, obviously with our coordination and support from DERCO. So they are the people negotiating the trade deal. It's not our ambassador in Washington. We do have a trade, we do have a Child Affair in Washington, who is the senior person for South Africa there, who does play a role from time to time to point there and there. But they do not negotiate the trade deal as it is being suggested in some quarters, that the fact that we don't have an ambassador might have affected us not coming up with an agreement. It's not correct description. There are countries that do have ambassadors in Washington. They don't have a trade deal. So the trade deal is negotiated by the relevant line function department, and in this instance in South Africa is the Department of Trade and Industry, which we are providing the support for, including our Child Affair in the US, who does from time to time point to the relevant people. So we do not think that the absence at this stage of an ambassador in Washington does impact on South Africa having any agreement or no agreement. Because if that was the case, all the countries that have ambassadors in Washington, they won't be having the same challenges that we're having. So this is a global phenomenon. It's not a South African problem. It's a challenge that the whole world is facing with the trade tariffs that we're dealing with. Lady R, I thought that the issue of Lady R was dealt with. There was a commission of inquiry. It made this finding. it was a non-issue. So it's no longer an issue now, and we will not want to speculate that Lady R has come back to this discussion unless someone brings it on the table. At this stage, it has never been raised as an issue. Whether we want, is this not an opportunity for South Africa to rethink its international allegiance, particularly with Iran? Again, it's part of those conspiracies and propaganda that Iran has paid for our case in the ICJ, which we have, you as journalists in South Africa knows that the South African government pays for this case. It is public knowledge. It is declared in all the documents of parliament. There is no Iran that has paid the ICJ case on behalf of the South African government. Neither is there big trade relations between South Africa and Iran to really put on the table. So it's neither here nor there as an issue, whether the issues of BEE and so forth, as I've said earlier on, they have not been brought to the table. So we can't speculate, but you know the position of the South African government with regards to BEE. It's a constitutional imperative, affirmative action. It's a constitutional imperative. Given the history of our country, it remains very important and strategic that we continue to transform the economy to reflect the demographics of our country. So this is a measure that remains a constitutional imperative for this country to continue on this path. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Ambassador Xolelwa Mlumbi-Peter, who is our Deputy Director General for Trade at the DTIC.
Thank you very much, and good morning, ministers. I'll respond to the issue with regards to consultations with the affected industries. The DTIC, as well as the Department of Agriculture, has been consulting with all affected industries, including the citrus industry, through various platforms. We had, for example, a NEDLAC meeting as late as Friday last week. But also throughout this process, we have been engaging the business associations, but also the affected industries. So we will continue to engage, and also the industries themselves have also been sending proposals to us in terms of how, one, they are affected, and two, how we can assist them. So we will also continue to engage with the citrus industry. In terms of trade proposals to the U.S., as Minister Lamola has indicated in the statement, it covers a number of issues that the U.S. has raised as critical. One, the issue of the trade deficit, even though we do not, of course, agree with the manner in which the trade deficit has been calculated, and the fact that the trade deficit that South Africa has with the U.S. arises from the fact that we export critical minerals. So the contributing factor is critical minerals that the U.S. needs for its industries. Secondly, it's as a result of exports of agriculture, which of course the U.S. also needs because we are in counter-seasonal production seasons. So as Minister Lamola has indicated, this closes the gap in the U.S. market and therefore does not pose a threat. But regardless of that, we've identified what we need to do in order to respond to the trade deficit, and we've identified products that we can import from the U.S., including LNG. We've also looked at areas where there are non-tariff barriers with regards to agricultural exports, and with the Department of Agriculture, we've also responded to that. We've also identified areas where we can invest in the U.S. economy and made a commitment of $3.3 billion that can be invested by our companies. So as Minister Lamola has indicated, what we've put forward is comprehensive, is ambitious, and covers all the critical areas of interest to the U.S., including tariffs, which of course will be negotiated with SACU as well. In terms of the Competition Commission issues and the impact on intra-Africa trade, I think the important point to raise is that intra-Africa trade remains absolutely important for South Africa, and we are looking at fast-tracking the implementation of the AfCFTA, including resolving the outstanding issues. We already have markets that are open for South Africa to take advantage of, and we've seen a rise in exports through the AfCFTA. Between February and July, our exports through the AfCFTA have reached over 1 billion rands. So you can see that a lot of our exporters are taking advantage of the new market access opportunities. But with regards to competition issues, we already have a competition protocol that has been concluded under the AfCFTA that ensures that we are able to have a coordinated mechanism to address anti-competitive behavior and ensure an inclusive continental market. South Africa has already ratified the competition protocol. It was ratified by Parliament last month, and therefore it is fully operational. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Before you come in, I just want to ask our Acting Deputy Director General for Transformation and Competition, Ms. Susan Mangole.
Thanks, Camille, and thanks, Ministers. Just in terms of the question that was raised to say whether there will be support to SMMEs and township businesses to diversify, I think one of the statements that Minister Lamola has made is that through the Competition Commission, we are going to be publishing the draft block exemption for exporters. So this is to mitigate against the impact of the increased tariff, as well as to make sure that the South African businesses, including those in the township, are actually diversifying in other markets. So the reason for this is that we want to help them to actually collaborate and coordinate. Yes, we are looking at a package that will also include using part of the transformation fund to be able to assist those businesses to diversify into new markets.
Did you want to come?
No, that's fine. Our Director General, Mr. Simpiwe Hamilton, from the DTIC.
Morning, Ministers and members of the media. Minister, I think the one question we had not answered is the one that relates to the number of jobs likely to be affected. We base this on the ongoing consultations that we have with all the sectors of the economy, from automotive, agriculture, and all the other sectors that are going to be impacted. And at this stage, we are sitting at approximately 30,000 jobs that could be affected by this if it were to be mismanaged in any manner. But we are looking at 30,000 jobs that could be affected at this stage. Was the other one?
No, can take the next round.
I did promise two colleagues in the room that I'd take their questions, and then we'll call it at that. So the gentleman in the grey at the back, and so you've been answered. Okay, so I can give one question away. Okay, yeah, in grey over here. Thank you.
I'm Simon Majaribudu from Independent Media. My question is that Minister Lamola said it was unfortunate that this government's efforts in resetting relationship with the U.S. has been underestimated and undermined by some actors within the society. Could you please maybe clarify to us who are you specifically referring to and what actions will be taken against those people? And what will happen if, despite all these actions, the U.S. doesn't budge on the figure? Does the country have plan B? Thank you.
Thanks.
My name is Saeed from Phoenix TV, China, and I just want to talk about the opportunity that this tariffs is going to bring, which is like after this imposition of the U.S. tariffs, it's not only on South Africa as well as on the other African countries. There has been a renewed momentum about the African Free Trade Agreement. And my question here is, does South Africa have a clear plan to work with the fellow African countries to revitalize this initiative, as well as as a way of jointly mitigate the impact of this tariff?
Thank you. I've got one more question on this WhatsApp, and then I'll hand over to the team, Ministers, DGs, to answer. So it says, regarding South Africa's relationship with Israel, will there be an opportunity to improve on this in any possible way, given the Trump administration's very favorable stance towards that country? Minister Tao, if I can ask you to come up and answer the questions directed at you, and then Minister Lamola, DG Dango, if you would take the other question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kamel didn't give me a choice this time. The load was eased earlier from the department. Part of what we were communicating today was in relation to the work that you're doing, and I don't want to call it a plan B, but the work that we're doing in accelerating access to alternative markets, providing support to industry, to access those markets, talking to buyers, but also what support packages we can provide to South African industry to enable them to navigate this complex environment. We are going to Cabinet on Wednesday with a set of more detailed proposals that we are finalizing with sister departments that would elaborate on the structure of the support package. But we've been working with the industry and sister departments in finalizing what that should look like. And I'm sure, subject to Cabinet and additional proposals and ideas put on the table at Cabinet, we would be able to communicate what that package looks like finally after Cabinet on Wednesday. And I'm sure colleagues know how Cabinet communicates its decisions. With regards to the to the Africa, excuse me, I tried not to speak earlier because this was going to happen, but I didn't wait. With regards to the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, we are working with our colleagues in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. As indicated earlier, we have also ratified various protocols. We are accelerating work to address what are some of the niggly issues that need resolution, including issues on rules of origin with regards to the auto sector, clothing and textile. So there's a lot of work that we're doing in relation to the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. So certainly I think that we should be able to make progress. There is a realization amongst colleagues that in fact it is important that we address what are the impediments to the implementation or cross-border trade, because I think all of us are committed to the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. There are issues that impact cross-border trade, such as logistics, such as certain rules and regulations that make it difficult for countries and investors to be able to invest in particular regions and or countries that we are working on. So these are matters that are receiving attention. I think I've covered everything that was affecting. Nothing. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. DG, sorry to put you on the spot.
Thank you. I thought Minister Tao was offering to answer that question. No, I think the question around our relationship with Israel, it's important to put it into context. South Africa's actions from the start has always been to prevent and end a genocide. And that's in line with the Genocide Convention. And the question comes at a time when most countries, even those who were initially very critical of ours, are taking practical actions to now stop the genocide. We see actions coming from the European Union, including statements from about 24 foreign ministers, and former European ambassadors have also raised their voice. So we see that what we warned about in January 2024, in March and again in May, that the outcome, the humanitarian consequences, is not the result of the war. It's actually the objective of the military action is now coming to fruition. It's not something that we are happy about because, unfortunately, this is what we've been trying to prevent. So we will continue to try and stop this genocide through diplomatic and legal means. But now we are being joined by larger sectors of the international community, and largely all wanting the same thing, to end or to prevent further deaths in Gaza.
Yeah, I think the last one relates to, I thought I'd already answered it, but because it has been asked again, that there are players who have undermined our efforts and all that. I've said that our view is that all of us as South Africans, irrespective of our political affiliations, whether you're an opposition, NGO, business, or in government, GNU, partner, or anything, once you get out of South Africa, we all have a responsibility to promote the national interest of South Africa in a positive way, particularly when stakes are high, like now, during these complex negotiations with the US. And it is against this background that I said that the approach that the President and the South African government has taken of being measured, of refraining, even sometimes out of extreme provocation, is on the basis of the understanding of what is at stake. Jobs, livelihoods, and the economy. And our focus is to preserve that. And in this case is to continue with this mutual beneficial relationship with the US while we continue to diversify across the markets in the globe, which we have already outlined how we are doing it. But this should not only be in the hands of government. Other stakeholders and role players also have a role. State actors and non-state actors also have a role to promote the national interest of South Africa, so that we can all preserve the jobs, we can all preserve the economy, we can all act in the interest of South Africa, Inc. That is the message we want to leave you with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. That concludes our press conference. We've pulled the two ministers out of a very important meeting, so we will then allow them to go back. That really shows the press conference is over. Thank you, colleagues. We will then keep in touch for other